All right, me. It is sometime in December. It's after school's ended and before Christmas. I know that much. It could be any day between those days. Um, but I read today Arms of the Man by George Bernard Shaw. I really don't know what to think about the production of this play. It is another play. I mean, I am definitely cheating the system here a little bit by reading a whole bunch of plays here at the end to make number go up, because number make brain happy. But yeah. This is a very interesting play in the sense that like it is a play that is meant to be read, not necessarily performed, right? It is a dialogue and a story that happens to be able to be acted out rather than something that needs to be acted out, right? Which is a little unique with plays, especially with it that Shaw writes. It is very like, it's not the first play, nor it will be the last play, that is very, very specific on the way that it wants characters look, but also the way that it wants set to look, and all of this stuff, right? And so that's pretty normal. But I think it does a lot in the way that these characters interact with each other, that it is not, and even like the movements themselves and the action that is described, right? It is not something that I like needs to be visually shown and visually interpreted for an audience, right? It is a book that just happens to work out as a play, right? Which I think is very interesting. The Arms of the Man also is making fun a little bit of like this, the cultural envisionment of at the time of being the military man, right? And I mean, this is something that comes up a great deal in literature around this time. Right, I'm just gonna get, that's the special copyright. I don't know if I have an actual publication date on when this was written, unfortunately. But if this, consider that you're considering cavalry still and things like that, you're looking at 1800s time, somewhere in there, with revolvers and things. You're probably looking at late 1800s or mid 1800s. My guess anyway. This is before the Russian Revolution, so makes sense there. But within literature, especially about literature at this time, there's this very large conception around the concept or idea of what the military man is, right? And it's this gallantry that exists. It's the Don Quixote of it all, of being this charismatic and noble man that is brave and courageous and is fighting for the betterment of everyone, and is willing to risk his life in order to defend his honor and defend his country, right? And that there's a nobility and chivalry to it and things like that. And we meet the Swiss, who has a last name that I cannot remember. It's a very long last name. Bush is the beginning of it, I think. But he is quite the opposite. He is running away from a fight that has just occurred, in which our main character, she yeah, let me re-explain this. Me cut this, figure it out, I guess. Okay, so now back to it, me. Right, you have the gallantry and everything, and what ends up happening is that you have a 23-year-old girl who acts rather younger, and gets brought up at a point later in Raina, who kind of buys into this concept until she meets this Swiss man who is basically on the run from one of these fights. Bunchili, that's his name. Bunchili is fighting on the opposite side, and is seeking refuge. Basically, hides in Raina's house. Raina takes a liking to him, but then also this kind of like, oh, this is not going to happen again, or I'm never going to see this guy again, I'm never going to hear this guy again. So off you go. Here's a picture of me. Off you go. Even though I'm married, or not married, I am betrothed. And then it turns out that Bunchili is pretty high up within this military, and like ends up having meetings with Raina's father and Raina's betrothed, as they are also both majors in the army, and it's just a whole mess and a whole ordeal, right? It's I mean, it's comedic play, and the everything is just kind of happening, and it's just happenstance, and everything is, it's a comedy of errors, right? And a comedy of not seeing or not being able to tell everything that's ever going to happen, right? So yada 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 yada. I don't know. There's some commentary on it about like the concepts that we have, like in comparing the, how do we think that the military people should be perceived, and what are we feigning this honor? Because as it turns out, all of our characters are feigning or lying to either themselves or to other people in some way, right? Whether it is through affairs and love and things, it is also through, how are people actually behind closed doors versus what they are in public. We learn that this uppity personality that Raina presents is an act that she has put on since a child, because that's how she thinks people in her position should act. And then, the same question that comes across for, is this how people in the military also are, is that they are not acting because they are, courageous or brave or gallant or whatever, and chivalrous, but because they think that someone in this position should do this, therefore they are going to do this. And then, that really comes across with Bunchili, who is this career military man who is like, yeah, what your betrothed did was stupid, and he's an idiot, and this guy's an idiot. The only reason he survived is because someone else bought the wrong cartridges for the guns, and so we couldn't shoot him in time. And it's the resigning to of oneself of what is the realities of how you're being treated, right? You're being treated as pawns or as fodder for the overall goals of the country, right? And then then a whole thing transpires, which, she put a picture of herself in this coat that they borrowed to send this guy home, Bunchili home, but then he never realized that there was a thing in the pocket, and now he's returned, and everyone's at the house, and yada 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 yada. And right, it's this comedy of knowing what's about to transpire, and just the anticipation of it happening, right? It's the comedy riding on the it's the same concept of watching a horror film and a horror movie that is like, you know, that is about to try to scare you, and so you're just anticipating it, and therefore you end up more scared than you would have been because now you're anticipating it. The same thing here, of where you see the comedic thing that is about to happen, and you're just having to sit there and wait for it, and anticipate it, and therefore it becomes funnier because now you're in on the joke, right? Yeah. Anything else to say? Everything works out in the end. It's all fun. It's all good. It's all enjoyable. It turns out Blunt Chili, despite being this like, oh, I'm just a military guy, I never have anything, is like the richest man in Switzerland. Yeah. I don't know. Fun, quick. Yeah.